Welcome back to Sector Report. I'm David Beatson, and this week, feed the world or save the planet? That's the question as Greenpeace revs up its attack on New Zealand's use of palm kernel to feed livestock. The season to be jolly is well and truly over, but is the wine industry heading for a happier new year in 2012? And will the government's primary growth partnership put new pep into New Zealand agribusiness?
Conversations have been had that have never been had before, and we've got some genuine collaborations that in some cases people never thought possible.
The Government Industry Primary Growth Partnership was launched with a hiss and a roar in the budget of 2009. Since then, more than $365 million has been poured into major research and innovation projects in an effort to generate sustainable long-term growth. More than 55% of the money comes from the private sector, and the forecast returns on investments to date are measured in billions. But is it working, and more important, is it working where it counts, down on the farm? Our Rural Affairs correspondent, Drew Chappell, has put a PGP project through a field trial in Masterton.
For farmers, change is a part of life, be it changes in weather, financial markets, economic forces or public opinion. It's a case of adapt or flounder in the primary sector.
Things are never going to go back to the way they were. I mean, technology is with us, and it's evolving at an incredible pace. In 20 years' time, I mean, it's just going to be completely different from what it is today, which is really, really exciting.
Trying to lead a revolution is often risky and requires time, money and some very good PR. One organisation which has plenty of all three is the country's Ministry of Agriculture, or as it's now known, the Ministry for Primary Industries. In response to the alarming lack of investment in research and development, the government set up the Primary Growth Partnership, designed to give primary industries a helping hand on the global stage.
What we see with Primary Growth Partnership is in the 2 years we have just under $500 million of primary sector research underway. I think it's an achievement that I personally am very proud of, that an achievement the national government can be very proud of.
The idea behind the PGP program is simple: provide businesses with funds to develop new systems or products to benefit any primary industry. And with this kind of funding up for grabs, there has been no shortage of willing applicants.
We've had 7 programs approved and contracted to date that are underway. They total on the Crown side around $174 million worth of investment over 7 years. Most programs run for 7 years, which is the maximum length of time under PGP, and that sum of money is broadly matched by industry, either in cash or in-kind contributions. In order for our primary sectors to take ambitious steps forward and for them to grow at the pace that we all aspire for them to do, what we've needed to do is provide the boards of these entities and their management with a degree of de-risking of their proposition. So some Crown funding allows them to do that, and allows them to take those risks in a more measured fashion, and with the support of the government.
For some in the red meat industry in particular, the next big change is already upon us. The Red Meat Sector Strategy Report, released by Deloitte in March of last year, detailed several areas of industry improvement, as well as outlining key targets for our largest meat markets. Several industry players responded by setting up a PGP project called Farm IQ Systems, aimed at improving the way consumers and farmers speak to one another and the best way of achieving lasting price increases.
The Red Meat Sector Strategy identified an opportunity for the meat industry to get better coordinated and aligned across the supply chain, and use information and data as the basis for doing that. Now, the Farm IQ program came ahead of that Red Meat Sector Strategy. It was, I think it was leading thinking, and that's very much about building an information flow from the market back to farmers, and then from farmers back to the market in a continuous circular fashion, if you like, of information flowing backwards and forwards that informs a whole bunch of activities that happen on farm around growing the product, and also through to the processing sector to ensure that we're getting absolute maximum value, and that we're able to give consumers some confidence about their product and what's coming through, and be able to tell a story around that.
And it's here on one of several IQ test farms that some of the early work is being done. It's still only the first year of a long project.
Farm IQ is about taking consumer requirements, coming to taste, tenderness, what really motivates a consumer to buy lamb, right back, or venison or beef for that matter, right back to the farming environment here and the steps in the middle, so the processing environment, so what attributes really have an effect on the consumer's final eating experience. The farmers involved in the program, they provide a lot of feedback to us to say, well, this works, this doesn't work, what were you thinking when you did that, for example. We come back and say, okay, how can we change it, and get them involved right at the grassroots so that we're actually evolving with everybody in it, not sort of sitting in Wellington and coming up with a bright idea and trying it on the unsuspecting.
Paul Crick, who runs a property here in Masterton, says the goal is ultimately to gain as much information about his animals as possible at an individual level. He says the big attraction of the Farm IQ model for him was the potential to get ahead of the game with state-of-the-art technology.
The EID tag, as an example, offers huge potential to really lift our production performance. We can just gather more information and ultimately make better decisions on what we're trying to do. And I guess some people see it as being an added complexity to our already dynamic business. But we very much view it as an absolute positive, and it's necessary both in the sense of us on farm trying to improve our performance, but I think ultimately it's also going to lead us to, in terms of where our products are going in the markets overseas, it's definitely going to give us a step in the door to say, hey look, we're actually doing this better, we're being more efficient about what we're doing, we're gathering more information, which ultimately, better animal welfare, better grown lambs, and we can hopefully provide more or better quality stock to that market.
The partners behind Farm IQ, which alongside the government include Landcorp, Silver Fern Farms and tech company The True Test Group, is projecting a benefit to the country of $1.1 billion by the end of the current funding scheme and another $8.8 billion by 2025. All this from an initial public outlay of nearly $60 million, matched and exceeded by industry. And after a 2011 farming year to remember more for the high prices than the natural disasters, many cockies will have a few extra dollars to invest in their farm's future. Paul Crick reckons he's on to a good investment.
It's currently raining here today, which is in the Wairarapa. It's fantastic for us. It's been an incredible season. Product prices at perhaps an all-time high for us. So I mean, all our ducks are in a row, which is fantastic. We've had a great lambing here, and you're really excited about what's happening. So yeah, hopefully there'll be some money within the system for other farmers as well to think about how they invest, and certainly there's some exciting possibilities with the technology that is now in front of us and what we can do, and particularly with the Farm IQ stuff. I mean, it's just the mind just boggles. I mean, there's just the possibilities are just endless.
Drew Chappell reporting from Masterton. Coming next, is it going to be a happy new year for the wine industry? Stay with Sector Report to find out. The New Zealand wine industry has achieved dramatic growth over the last decade. Since 2002, our total vineyard area is up 144%, with double the number of growers and some 700 wineries across the country. Export sales topped $1.1 billion last year, but for the last 3 years, the industry has been fighting hard to lift its profitability in the face of a grape glut, a global recession, and in some cases, heavy debt coupled with sliding land values. Well, now PricewaterhouseCoopers has produced a strategy review for the New Zealand wine growers on the challenges and changes ahead. We're joined by New Zealand Wine Growers General Counsel, Advocacy and Trade, Dr. John Barker. Welcome, John. Well, the wine industry has been under pressure really since 2008. Is it ready to make strategic change?
Yes, certainly I think the industry is. I mean, the industry's been going through a really intense period since 2008, when we had an oversupply and also the global financial crisis. And we commissioned a report from Pricewaterhouse, a strategic review really to look at a couple of things. First, where the industry is now, to really take stock and think about where we are in the world, and also to look at New Zealand Wine Growers, which is the organisation I work for.
All right, so bluntly, where in the world are you?
Well,
in recovery mode.
Yes, well, I think, overall in the industry we are starting to see things improve. A couple of very interesting insights from the Pricewaterhouse report were first that the strategic advantage that we have in New Zealand, which was a reputation for high quality and distinctive wines, and that obviously translates through to higher prices in the market, has actually come through that period pretty well intact. And I guess the other real insight.
And yet, strangely enough, one of the things that occurred during that period was there was a concern about the sale of New Zealand wine in bulk.
Yes, yes.
But you're telling me it was actually the premium brand quality that kept the industry in a good position in a difficult time.
Yes, it certainly has. I mean, the bulk wine side of the industry has definitely increased, and that's one of the things that the review dealt with in the sense that it's kind of a fact of life at the moment, and in fact a fact of the global market, because one of the things we've seen globally is that bulk wine has increased generally. But what we're seeing in the markets is that bulk wine is generally going into higher price point products within the range that those products are being sold in.
What other kind of new challenges or fresh insights did that report offer?
In terms of challenges, I think the challenge is really to look at the market, look at where we are now, and I guess target ourselves on some of the future markets. And it strongly identified China as a market that's growing, and we're doing very well in China, and we're getting good returns in that market, and also identified that there's still a lot of capacity in the US market for development of our product.
I'll come back to that in a minute, but just looking at some of the problems you've been through, I mean, does this report give you the answer to how to deal with a grape glut?
Well, in terms of the grape glut, I mean...
You found the answer.
Yeah, the answer is sell more wine, essentially, and that's what we have been doing. And a lot of that has gone out in bulk, and there are risks attached to that, which the review did identify. And it's come up with some proposals about how to address those.
Well, one of the things that we found during that period was that, in fact, your grape growing capacity exceeds your winery capacity, the capacity to actually convert it into wine. The recent forecasts seem to indicate this could be a continuing problem. And how is New Zealand Wine Growers going to address that issue?
Well, it's a problem that has been identified. I think it's not one that has really bitten yet, because there still seems to be a bit of capacity over what we've actually produced. I think that what's been identified is about 350,000 tonnes worth, and we were about 328,000 tonnes last year. But to the extent that it becomes a problem, it's probably not the worst problem in the world to have, in the sense that it's a problem of success.
What about this question of reprioritising marketing expenditure?
Yep.
Now, how much do the wine growers, the New Zealand wine growers, actually influence that?
We, as an organisation, have a very important marketing platform, and it's paid. It's a lot of it's paid by the wineries themselves. It's a user pays, and then some of it's paid through the levies that come to our organisation.
But essentially, you're concerned with the New Zealand brand. Correct?
We are, absolutely.
Generically. And so, how do you see the New Zealand brand developing in terms of the strategy recommendations that are being made?
Well, we see ourselves, I guess, New Zealand Wine Growers as the stewards of the New Zealand brand, the New Zealand wine brand, because we're the national organisation for wineries. And within the review, one of the things that's been recommended is to actually take stock of how the brand is being perceived in the world. We did this in 2007, just before the oversupply, and it's a good time now to actually go out there and do it again, and see how we position relative to our competitors.
Now, one of the other things that's recommended is that you increase resourcing for social responsibility initiatives. Now, again, what is that based on?
I guess, wine is a product that has alcohol in it, and alcohol is something, if it's misused. If it's abused, it can cause harm. We certainly don't shy away from that fact, and we don't want people to misuse our product. It's not good for us. And so we feel that it's time for us to be a bit more active and actually giving positive messages out there about drinking culture and appropriate drinking behaviours.
What I hear in this is a sharpening of focus.
Yes.
Being recommended rather than any significant change of direction overall. What I'd like to know is, if you pursue this program, how's it going to affect the consumer of New Zealand wine?
Well, the consumer of New Zealand wine will hopefully be better off because they'll get to enjoy increasingly better product. I guess in terms of pricing at the moment, consumers are doing very well.
They're probably feeling very comfortable right now. But when I hear you talking about premium, I hear cash register ringing a little louder.
Yes, well, I think it's probably fair to say that most wineries would like to get a little bit more for their wine, definitely. But in terms of the domestic market, we're in a situation where there are still a lot of wineries that are struggling to make profit. And we've got 700 New Zealand wineries and an infinite number of wineries around the world to sell their product through a distribution chain that's dominated by a couple of large retailers. So
an intensely competitive.
An intensely competitive environment, yes. So,
well, we will see what the strategic change brings. I thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, David.
Dr. John Barker, General Counsel, Advocacy and Trade for New Zealand Wine Growers. And next, another challenge to the dairy industry over its appetite for palm kernel oil cake. That's coming up on Sector Report. Welcome back to Sector Report. Last year, New Zealand imported around 1.4 million tonnes of palm kernel oil cake from Southeast Asia to use as a supplement to locally sourced cattle fodder. Greenpeace says a report it's commissioned from independent experts shows that feeding out all that palm kernel could have boosted our annual greenhouse gas output by nearly 9 million tonnes of carbon emissions. According to Greenpeace, New Zealand now has a choice. Get a reputation for industrial dairying that drives climate change and destroys the orangutan habitat in Southeast Asia, or become a world leader in low-carbon dairying. Greenpeace campaigner Simon Boxer is here to explain how they justify that challenge. Simon, welcome. Tell me, just run through the earth, how can 1.4 million tonnes of imported PKE generate up to 8.9 million tonnes of carbon emissions?
It certainly sounds a lot, and the reason is when you go
I didn't know digestion actually multiplied the weight.
Well, what's going on
digestion.
Is the rainforest destruction in Indonesia, Malaysia is actually one of the largest sources of greenhouse gases anywhere in the world. Indonesia alone is the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases because of the deforestation. So it's not just the trees coming down, it's the soil actually being degraded and the carbon being released from that and the methane generated and something called nitrous oxide releases as well. So it can actually, through the deforestation of which the palm industry is one of the main causes in Indonesia, we are seeing vast quantities of greenhouse gases, and therefore using products that come from that palm industry has its associated carbon footprint.
Okay, but is that exactly what your expert consultants found in their study? Did they actually say it's coming from these deforested zones, it's coming from peatlands, it's not actually coming from sustainably farmed palm?
Yes, I mean, this issue is quite interesting now. It's becoming well established that there is a big problem in using products such as palm oil and palm kernel expeller.
Have your office actually proven, physically proven, that the PKE used in New Zealand came from production areas that were formerly rainforests, peatlands and habitats for endangered species?
Yes. I mean, the reason is that if
How
you look,
do they do that?
If you look at the palm industry itself, it claims from its own figures, and we only use the figures coming from Indonesian government and from the palm industry, that only 10% of all palm products from Indonesia can be classed as sustainable, that have not been put onto rainforested, degraded land. So it means that when you then look at the areas through satellite imagery, through going on the actual scene itself, and seeing the destruction of the forest, but also the degradation of peatlands, then you actually see the vast quantities of greenhouse gases that are coming. So it's pretty well established now as scientific fact.
But isn't it also a fact, however, that palm kernel accounts for just 1% of the revenue, for instance, in Malaysian palm farming? It doesn't seem to be the real value driver of the industry's growth.
Well, I think the key issue here is that...
Surely it's the palm oil rather than the palm kernel.
Well, in fact, in New Zealand, we spend more money importing palm kernel than palm oil.
Yes, I know, but I mean, I'm asking you, if rainforests and peatlands are being destroyed, are they being destroyed to produce palm kernel, or are they being destroyed to produce palm oil? Now, that number, 1% of the revenue, would suggest to me that, in fact, they're being destroyed to produce palm oil, not kernel.
So the palm industry itself says there are 3 products that are coming from their production and deforestation. That's 2 types of oil and palm kernel. They class it as a product. Well, and it's worth $1 billion a year, and importantly, that's a very high profit level for those industries. So the key thing is that it's not disputed. In fact, in the UK, the actual ministry that deals with agriculture has actually said that palm kernel expeller is in fact a product and is not a byproduct of the palm industry.
Well, I understand what they say, but the fact of the matter is the Malaysians would say we only get 1% of our revenue from palm kernel. In fact, we're in the palm oil business, really, when 99% of our revenue comes from matters other than palm kernel. I don't quite see that this is the huge driver that's actually causing the destruction of the rainforest. The driver must be the demand for palm oil, surely.
But the key thing is we've demonstrated that despite whatever level of economic return that's coming from it, it has a footprint. Under international standards, under international science standards, it has a footprint. That footprint is being added to New Zealand dairy products unnecessarily, given that we have maize silage alternatives in this country. So we are essentially loading our products with a carbon footprint that, when you start taking that onto the supermarket shelf, starts making us uncompetitive to major other sources of dairy.
One point in your campaign, you said that the World Bank had withdrawn funding from palm farming development. Correct?
No, that was a specific thing to do with one of the companies involved, that they had been given loan guarantees and other funding, and when human rights activists actually raised that, the World Bank did an inquiry and they came to a conclusion that actually they should suspend that funding. Because they didn't want to be associated with what was going on. Because the key thing is that...
No, the reason I'm asking that is,
in that case,
they've just produced a new funding policy for the palm industry, which it says places conditions on the granting of funding designed to protect endangered species, indigenous community interests and the environment. Correct?
Yeah, and that's a direct result of our campaigning and other groups campaigning.
Okay, but when there are suppliers who are beginning to feel incentivized to move on to sustainable farming, is this really a time for New Zealand to turn its back on those producers?
Well, the key thing is only 10% of all palm products coming out of Indonesia and Malaysia can be claimed to be sustainable. Our report actually was showing how in Indonesia there's 11 million hectares of unused arable land that could be used for palm plantations, and yet it isn't. And the reason it isn't is because using the timber coming from the deforestation is an extremely profitable part of the overall business of the palm industry. So what we're doing is we're basically in bed with companies in Indonesia who are breaking Indonesian law, who are giving us a really bad reputation by being involved with them, and we're giving them $270 million every year in pure profit.
I read your expert report. It did not make a specific recommendation that New Zealand should stop using PKE altogether. What it did say is that we should ensure PKE comes from safe and sustainable sources. Am I right?
That's right. And only 10% of all products can be claimed to be that. And if you look at what that 1.4 million tonnes that we imported into New Zealand, that was nearly a third of the world's tradable supply of palm kernel expeller. So the point is, we're obviously importing a large amount that isn't sustainable. Our campaign is very much trying to push the industry in Indonesia, both palm, pulp and paper and other types of industries, to essentially find other land that isn't involving deforestation of rainforest. And it's that simple. So it's not that we're against the industry, it's that we're trying to find sustainable ways that does not mean that we end up with Indonesia destroying one of the last rainforests and creating a huge amount of climate change in the process.
Simon Boxer, thanks very much.
Not at all, thank you.
Greenpeace campaigner Simon Boxer. And that wraps up our first report for 2012. Remember, you can catch this show again anytime online at country99tv.co.nz. Thanks for your company. I'm David Beatson for Sector Report. See you next week.